Blackballed. Blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James DeFiore, and this is Blackballed. I'm going to set this one up like this, because I just sort of told the story off air, and I think it's funny. Because of who they sent me. I was looking on Instagram. For those who know me, know that I really do not like show running and booking guests, because it takes up like 20 hours a week of my time. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to do a daily show with guests. So that's just what I have to do. And so I was trying to book a guest. And I'll say who it is when I introduce. I want my guest today, I want his name to be the first name I say in the show. But I was going to book a guest. So I inquired about it. And then some other company, like an hour later, sends me this person's resume. And I'm like, well, I know him. Like, you know, so what was interesting is that the name that I was asking for, which I don't know how big it is or is not, they didn't even answer me on that. And then they send me the bigger name. I'm like, okay. And he's a really cool cat. I've been going in my this person's deep dive for the last 3 days, and it's amazing how many things that I remember him from that I didn't remember it was him. But one of the most revolutionary shows ever on television, Queer as Folk, is one of them, and his name is Hal Sparks. Hal, how are you, buddy?
Hi. I'm spectacular. And by the way, I don't mind being the ringer that people throw in when somebody turns you down for personal reasons and they go, not that guy. And they, and the publicist doesn't want you to know that, take offense, not have other guests. So they're like, who's the sweetest person we have that we can throw his way so that he'll never know that this Instagram model he's been chasing around the internet has just ghosted him. And I'm okay with that. I want you to know that. I want everybody else to know that. And it's nice to be here on a show that opens so rap heavy and drifts into flamenco guitar so seamlessly.
So funny. And it still says title on the on that thing. You know how like the video software before you add text will just say title?
Yes.
I just didn't take it off. I just kept it there.
I kind of like it. It's like mid-90s band posters and that kind of stuff. I'm using the fucking sans font for the hell of it, because that's the first one.
Well, first of all, if they come across this podcast and it's an accident or whatever, and it very well likely could be, then they might think by looking at you that this is a Gene Simmons telethon or something, because, dude,
that's right.
I wasn't aware. It's so funny. I just pulls that tongue out of nowhere. Did you do a Gene Simmons impersonation at one time? Because that was actually pretty good.
No, but I will say that he was touring early with his solo band pre-Kiss when my mom was, kind of bouncing around the sexual revolution. It's entirely possible. I doubt it.
That would be quite the honor. That would be quite.
Yeah. I am related to my cousin on my dad's side, so we think it's strictly that way. And people only do that when I have long hair. The rest of the time, they're like. They do something like, young Steve Martin if I let my hair go white, that kind of thing.
I think cousin fucking is largely misunderstood, for one thing. But another thing I heard you say...
I don't understand it, but perhaps you could tell us, because you live in the...
Well, I was just about to say, cousin fucking might be a little bit, overblown. Because I remember, and this is a hard pivot, but I caught something that you said at the end of something else that I was watching of yours. And the line that you used was, I used to live down south, but I had to move because I got too smart, or I started reading. I can't remember what it was, but I started thinking too much.
Oh yeah. Right? It kicked me out for thinking too much. Yeah.
You're a neat guy, because you don't fall into that sort of personality type where you would associate with a really uber progressive mindset, but you are really progressive, and you've been sort of at the the precipice of certain cultural pivots and
sure.
The fold in the next chapter. To be honest with you, I have no idea, because I didn't look it up and I don't know about your family history. I was wondering, would a straight guy be able to be in Queer as Folk today as a gay man?
Well, technically, yes. And here's the problem they ran into when they tried to do other versions where they're like, we're only going to hire gay people or whatever. there's a slippery slope in the legal aspect of that if that is allowed, then you can hire people who are only straight for things as well. You can't if you want non-discrimination, you gotta tough it out through all of it. And so even asking someone's sexuality, when we live in kind of the post Instagram era, there's so many actors coming up where there's no hiding who you are for the rest of your fucking life, I suppose. But the short answer is, of course. I put it up there right with people who are like, you couldn't even make Blazing Saddles today. And I'm like, have you seen the Chappelle Show? It's basically Blazing Saddles, the series. And it's the same thing. Richard Pryor and Mel Brooks wrote Blazing Saddles together, amongst other people. And Neil Brennan and Chappelle wrote that show together, amongst other people. It was like a young Jewish guy and a black dude writing all this stuff and doing everything. It's the exact same mentality. It's a lot of the same language. And it was on basic cable. Yeah. So the idea that you couldn't do it anymore is a little silly. Would there be some pushback? Sure. I don't doubt it. The problem is you will always run aground with, I believe gay actors should be able to play straight people. And we're not going to really be at a point of equity where it doesn't matter and people can see past that. So, the idea of, branding corralling is a mistake, I think. That said, at the time, there were plenty of gay actors who wouldn't audition for the part because their agents and even the casting directors in some cases would tell them, don't do it, because then people will know you are gay and you'll never work again.
Well, your agent, you ended up parting ways with this person because they made it seem like, oh, you don't want this one, but they gave it to you, right? Like,
oh yeah, well, no, they offered it to me because it was I was requested. Apparently, the exec producers were having such a hard time casting the thing, and I was
what was the casting couch like for
There wasn't one. There was a casting ledge.
Oh, stand-uppers. Good.
Yeah. Well, the opening, like the scene we auditioned with and that I auditioned with other actors with, was this the suicide scene in the first episode where Michael and Brian are standing on this ledge and Brian's about to jump to his death and Michael steps up there with him, basically to talk him down. Which when we ultimately shot it on a ledge of an 8-story building. We were on the top of it. It was a good time.
Wow, Tom Cruise is in the house. Check it out, 2 of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have I done all my own stunts? All but one, I think. Yeah.
I was trying to find a clever way to ask about your role in Queer as Folk and if you were a method actor.
Yeah,
and
no.
I was gonna say, just curious, and then everything's sort of the
yeah,
of one another.
Yeah, no, here's the issue with it. You can't. I think the message of that show is allowing people to be who they truly are, and that's the point. And a lot of people would ask me, "Did you go to get into the role? Did you go to gay clubs and interact with people to see what it was like and blah blah blah?" And I don't mean like sexually interact, but just see it and hang out. And I said no, because I wouldn't know what Michael felt there. My character, because I'm not interested in anyone there. I wouldn't be sexually attracted or worried that somebody would overlook me or feel passed over or, get attracted to someone and they don't give me the time of day like he would, but in a straight club at, 5'9" and, $165, fully clothed, soaking wet with long hair, at any given time during my life, I've had many times where as a straight guy, I felt that towards women in my life. And if you just understand the emotion of it, you just extrapolate it over the other person. By the way, method is bullshit. It's complete horseshit across the board. I'm not saying that Daniel Day-Lewis is a complete asshole, but I am saying that what he does is keep his accent the whole time. He does not stay in character the whole time because you couldn't. Because if you were actually Abe Lincoln in this moment, you wouldn't continue the scene. You'd go, "Dear God, what are these crazy machines all around us? This I'm being recorded. What kind of listening device is over my head?" You'd be you'd be a crazy person. You'd be a time traveler, not a character.
I heard some people talk about that with Marlon Brando, about how with certain individuals that he was super tight with, like he'd be, the producer would come over and he'd be like, "Oh, Marlon's in character." And so the legend of the method actor grew, but then as soon as the producer would leave, he would just drop it all and hang out with his friends. Like it wasn't something that he did.
Yeah, he was blazingly full of shit. Yeah. He was, have you ever watched the Heart of Darkness documentary?
No.
Oh my God. No, so the making of Apocalypse Now, they did a documentary called Heart of Darkness. And the story of them, they wanted him. He was biggest actor at the time they could possibly get. It was going to pivot the movie. It was going to be one of the reasons why it was stand. It was, oh my God, Marlon Brando is playing Colonel Kurtz in this book that was a huge hit, and it's all about the Vietnam War, and it's going to be this retelling it, and blah blah blah. And Kurtz in it is almost a skeleton of himself in the book. He's like he's not eating anymore. He's kind of wasting away amongst these villagers and living amongst them. And Marlon Brando, and they signed this contract and didn't think it through apparently, that one of the things said, okay, he's got to be done shooting by this date, and for every day past that, you owe him $1 million. And they're like, well, that's fine. We got fucking 6 months. They forgot to put in, you have to start filming with everybody else. So he showed up like 2.5 months into production with 2 weeks left, and to get all of his stuff. And he didn't know any of his lines, and he was 180 pounds overweight. Like, he was the opposite of the character and stuff. And so they had to read him his lines like a fucking baby offline. They would say the line and he would repeat the line and stuff. And later on he would get a headset, and you have to watch it. And then my favorite moment in the whole thing is like, they would shoot him in this. He would just, they needed footage. They needed, him saying fucking anything. He wouldn't memorize the lines. So at one point they just had him improvise, like just say stuff like Martin Sheen would just say stuff and he would respond to it, and he would try to sound poetic or something. And it's based on a fucking book, a bestseller. So they're like, the lines are in the fucking book. You can't just blow it. Anyway, so there's one point where, and the footage is so fucking great because it actually works that he's fat, by the way, because it turns the whole story on its head that he's not a victim of a war machine, but he's enjoying himself in this process. But at one point he's talking and he goes, I can't think of any more dialogue today. And he just walks away. And
that could have worked too.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah. Yes, it could have. You're absolutely right. It could have worked if he said, I can't think of anything else to say. And that would have been a usable sentence. But the fact that he said dialogue fucked the actual take. That's what
it could have added dialogue in the script, like later or before, where the other person's like, I heard you wanted to establish dialogue.
This is the
ancient.
This is the 70s. Like the best, they were planning, I think, at one point that if he wouldn't do anything, Martin Sheen was going to just like voice over what he had said to me. I remembered him saying blah blah blah, and then just show him standing there turning, and then do something. But at one point he's talking. It's my favorite moment, I think, in film history, that wasn't on purpose. And he's talking. You're an errand boy. You mean I swallowed a bug. A bug flies in his mouth, and he goes, I swallowed a bug. And I'm like,
my contract clearly states $1 million a bug.
Bugs. I'm on a vegan diet, and bugs are living things. So
you were saying something about gaining weight and it fitting the character. What popped into my head was an immediate example of the opposite. The movie that
The Machinist
was the Breaking Bad movie, El Camino.
Yeah.
And fucking Todd was fat, and it's supposed to happen before, Jesse is rescued by Walter, and I was just like, and it bugged me from the very first frame. I was like, he's gained like 30 pounds. Like this,
right? And
then if you go watch Breaking Bad next week, he'll lose that weight.
Right. Well, I mean, it is meth. They do have one. They have one saving grace, is that all you got to do is probably meth for a week, and you'll be an emaciated, shadow of your former self.
They should strongly consider selling meth as a dietary.
No, I don't think so. I'm going to push back on that. I'm no nutritionist, and we probably have to preface this interview with that legally.
Actual weight loss may include teeth. Go ahead.
Yes, right, exactly. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not the best strategy.
Yeah, you're probably right. Mm-hmm. That's why you left the South. There was a whole bunch of reasons, from what I hear.
Yeah. Oh, indeed. And I go back with great frequency, but yeah.
I want to talk about because I saw you do it today, and I actually thought, and we talked about this off air, I actually thought that your new main was part of the bit of what you were doing, and it was a sort of a little kick on little razzing on Russell Brand. Before I talk about what you did today, I just want to let you know that I think I'm on the same page as you, because for the last, I don't know how many months, I began noticing that Russell Brand is following in the footsteps of like Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and these guys that are like, I am so fed up with the people on the left and progressives that I am going to only criticize them and never criticize anything
Right.
center
Yeah.
or center right. And it's because they look at their analytics. And so here's the interesting thing about mega analytics is that, because I noticed this, because I'm a centrist guy. I can cut up Trump and Obama. I don't give a fuck. I'm not saying they're equal, but I could find something to criticize about anybody in power. That's not a problem.
Right. Sure.
But the idea that that these commentators, that these journalists will criticize the left, realize they get a new audience when they do that, and this audience is not just loyal, but they're very demanding. So they just completely abandon criticizing anything on that side, so they don't lose their followers.
Of
Something's
course.
happened to Russell Brand,
And it becomes like they're just carrying a bucket for it, because it's not even that they're just like, okay, from now on, I'm going to bring on like center right people or people with a right, conservatism that doesn't get a voice. Because in all honesty, right now, the dearth of voices in terms of interview shows like Brands and others is not the fucking fringes of either side. It's people who are like, look, I lean this way because the overall, like, as a Democrat, I'm for democracy. I believe in one person, one vote. And I believe that, in democratic taxation, not socialism. I want people, I think if the public decides to set up public schools, that's not socialism. That's us deciding where our tax dollars go and what for. That's fine. And as a Republican, somebody would believe, I believe we're a republic, and that, rabble tends to scatter, focus, and we need people who have skin in the game and own land and shit like that to be the front runners of the decision making, because everybody else wants to just scream and they know fucking nothing about how things run. If you believe that end to a light direction either way, you're going to be completely lost in the conversations that are happening right now. And in that ping pong you're talking about, from them used to be on the left side of things, and Bernie followers largely, most of them are like Bernie fillators that went like him and Dorr, like, right? They just love Bernie until they fucking hate him.
I loved Bernie a lot. Like, as a Canadian, I would look down and like watching that primary that he probably should have won because the DNC stole it. Like, and that bird flew on the podium that time. I was like, this is fucking magical. He's a Disney character, for Christ's sakes. This is amazing.
Right.
And then it didn't happen. But
the other version. But what they'll do is they'll just ping pong to the far right fringes of this stuff, and then below this, like, I criticize everybody, but then never go into the criticism of those folks, like, just to get them on there because they do boost your analytics and they're a very loyal, crazy crowd. If you can loop the QAnons and the preppers into watching your show, you're in. They're not going to buy any of the products of the advertisers on your channel, but the advertisers don't know that from the analytics. So they're just,
I have good news. I don't have any advertisers.
There you go.
So there you go. No, but I'm part of the biggest network in Canada, and it's interesting because I'll have them on my show. The far left is less likely to accept an invitation than the far right is. I've noticed that too.
Sure.
And then the far right, it will give you that spike in analytics, but I will invariably get emails that say things like, I can't believe you had Megan Murphy on your show. Why are you so hateful towards the trans?
Why are you platforming? Right. But yeah.
I've never hated a word more in my life than platforming. Yeah. I was like, dude, there was already a word. It was called interviewing, and it's fine.
Yes.
You're going to be okay.
Yep. It covers all the bases. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And the example I always use is like a guy won the Pulitzer Prize for interviewing Osama like 2 years before 9/11. He's a mass murderer. You can't handle Ann Coulter? Are you serious? Like,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you want the people that you like to push back from their perspective. Because what happens if they don't, quote unquote, platform the people you're talking about, if you don't bring somebody on and talk to them, then the only people they're ever going to talk to are people who are cradling their balls across the finish line. And then you go like, why has nobody ever confront these people? And you're like, oh, because you will cancel anybody on your side that has them on. That's why. It's just, it's such a self-made trap. It's a snare people fit around their own ankle. It's very silly. But I mean, I do think there are ways where people will just glom on to the shock value of certain people and have them on. That I find is wrong in sales. Like when TYT had Matt Gaetz on, for example. Like there are plenty of right-leaning or even right-wing members of Congress who weren't currently, when they had him on, under investigation for sex trafficking of a minor and admittedly giving like ecstasy to women and then having sex with them and other like at a certain point, like fuck that dude. And you can't find somebody else. Well, of course you can, but it's not going to gin up the viewers. It's not going to get the eyeballs the way it does. And that's where it's very mercenary. And I think that's where platforming for mercenary reasons is wrong. If you really want to confront this and have a conversation your way, that has value. But if you're just like, oh, I can get some of those people will stay behind and like or subscribe just because I had them on, and they'll never watch me again. Yeah. But I'll have that number. I'll notch that belt. That's wrong. And
I think it's wrong too. And I also think that inevitably the content suffers when you think like that anyways, right? Like it's just,
agreed.
You know, it's an interesting time to sort of be sort of in the soup as minor and obscure as I am with this podcast in Canada. I'm 215 episodes deep, and what I really like about it is I won't call it a community, because honestly I don't talk to any motherfuckers that have podcasts, so I'm not a part of any community, right? But like the people that do this shit are like, you know, it's a creative space, man. Like when you don't have to deal with like so many parts of the machine, like all of it, basically, you can say what you want, you know, and really it's the most organic way to find an audience. How have you found, because I work with Dean Blundell, who was one of the biggest Canadian DJs ever. He worked for Edge 102. And, you know, I asked him about the guys that go over from radio and television to podcasting. And it's weird because it seems stripped down and more simplistic, but a lot of people fucking like take forever to understand it, to get it, even if you're a seasoned professional at a bunch of stuff you do, because you were never the guy pushing the buttons. You still seem like you have a guy pushing buttons because your hands have been behind your back, haven't they, for most of this interview?
Yeah, but I'm not switching scenes. I mean, I could if you want me to. I mean, I can. Yeah, I mean, I can put us all on screen right now. I can create all kinds of loops. I can make a graphic go that tells people to like my show or whatever, hit the like, that goes to 666. I got all that.
Actually, you have all the toys. Do you have the Atari-like theme music that played at the end of that podcast you just did tonight? Because I was like, this is the greatest Casio keyboard beat I've ever heard. It was wonderful.
That is actually, and I can't play it through the setup we have right now because I avoid doing that by accident when I'm guesting on things, because sometimes it can happen. But it's in the other like in the scenes in the opening of the show, I wrote that on because I was like, I need a theme song for the show that sounds like Fletch sneak around music. You know what I mean? Like an
cat
80s
burglar.
Yeah, like an 80s comedy burglar or detective or journalist kind of movie where they're like, you know, following somebody, that kind of stuff. I was like, I want something that's kind of light like that. And so I sat down and made that on my, in Logic.
Yeah, it matched the hair too.
It it doesn't quite. I mean, these days, if you want to see what matches the hair, Tuesday I'm hosting at the Whiskey and in LA, and I'm singing. What are we doing? We're doing Best of the Remake. So we're doing like You Really Got Me. We're doing Helter Skelter. We're doing what's the other one? Oh, I'm doing a duet of Dancing in the Street, the David Bowie, Mick Jagger version with my friend Mick Scott. He's going to be doing the Jagger part, and I'll be doing the Bowie part. And then we're doing Freebird because the last surviving member of Skinner just died. And while it doesn't keep in theme with the song of remakes that we were doing, everybody gets yelled at to do Freebird. So it's, everybody will remake it now that they've all passed. So
yeah, that sounds like a fun night. Is that like a regular event that happens there? People in Canada might not know, but there's a big history with that bar, right? Like it's in the middle of Hollywood, isn't it?
The Whiskey is where all your favorite hair metal bands, if you have any, started from. Motley Crue, Rat, Warrant, all those guys. The Whiskey is the place, and it's been around since the 60s. It was a go-go bar back in the day, and then it became a band venue, and the Doors played there, and it's pretty amazing. If you see the Wildside video, I think it was. No, was it Wildside? Or Kickstart My Heart. One of those. Kickstart My Heart. They did that video at the Whiskey. And so there's a thing called the Ultimate Jam Night where we bring in people like last time we had Orianthi and Tracy Guns and, former members of like Quiet Riot and other bands, and then younger musicians who are coming up and, were heavy hitters, and they all just jam and nobody rehearses. You just get your song on Saturday and they say, know the song by Tuesday. And then when you just on the downbeat, everybody just goes.
Because people buy the quirkiness, right? They want to see like people kind of try to throw it together like you're in a garage more so than a studio kind of thing.
Well, no, I think they just want to see the talent and people and the fact, they like these people can pull it off. And so for me, it's like, I'm doing 4 songs and most people do 2, like singers will do 2 that night, 1 or 2. And I end up doing 4 because I'm hosting and singing throughout a 2-hour show. And I've done it before as just a guest. And then I took over hosting it a few months ago because I love doing it. But it's, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
I was just saying like that place itself is a piece of history. So it's a great time, to do it.
Yeah. We have a place like that in Toronto, the Horseshoe Tavern. That's like,
of course.
And the Alma Combo, I guess, was sort of like that as well. But there's I like those.
First concert I saw in Canada was a Government.
Was it an electronic music show or was it what was it?
No, it was not. It was Nickelback and I want to say Default. Yeah. Yeah, Nickelback and Default, I think, was playing. I saw Danko Jones at another venue. I don't remember the name of it when I was there. And then Jeff Healy's place was just around the corner from my apartment. So he would
Bathurst and Queen kind of thing.
Yeah, I lived at King in Bathurst. I lived right across from the Wheat Sheaf. Yeah, and so
did you know the Fish Fry Boys?
I did not.
They were in the same building.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well,
small town.
I often came in late and passed out and went back to work the next day because we had long friggin' hours. And if I did have time to myself, I would either go because I speak Chinese, I would go into Chinatown, which is why I wanted to live in that part of the area because it was walking distance. It was the nicest place I could find in walking distance to the Chinatown over there, as far as available apartments at the time for when I was shooting. And or I would walk up and see Healy play if he was around. He would drop in.
Yeah.
And then I would just, occasionally on a Friday or Saturday, I would walk up and go, is Healy coming by? And they're like, he's not here tonight. He'll be here tomorrow. And so I would just come back the next night and go down there and sit and watch him.
Yeah, he was there a lot of times when I went there. I've probably been there a handful of times, like 6, 7 times. And I saw him there maybe 2 or 3 times when I was there. I actually did a show there. It was weird. I didn't think I'd like their setup very much. It's kind of cramped, but then I really loved it. It was really intimate the way they had the seating and stuff. It was a regular bar, but people were respectful about how close they were to the talent. They didn't. You never want to get the drunk person in the front row talking really loud to her friend about the date that went badly last night, and you're trying to sing a song.
Right.
And another thing, I don't know if you're familiar with Typo Negative, but you could totally probably pull this off. Like I think you should start impersonating people that you look like because of the hair. So it'd be like this guy. Right?
Yeah, me, Danzig, right?
Yeah, the Creed guy, right? With the long hair now?
Maybe he's got short hair now, doesn't he?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. My Creed knowledge starts and stops.
I hope on and all I heard. That guy hit on my one of my best friends. He passed. My buddy Robert Hall, rest his soul, hit on his wife at a party. And
the Creed guy did?
Yeah. And he was drunk and being a complete asshole. And at one point, Rob and I were like, all right, well, if I'm with you next time, we'll bounce him. What do you want? Like, okay. We'll roll the lead singer of Creed. Sure.
I would have considered allowing him to have sex with my wife just to be like, something crazy might happen. Like the sex with the wife would be crazy. But I'm just saying, like,
oh, I see. I thought you meant like the heavens would open up because they were basically a Christian band. And
no, it's really a joke about how much I don't really respect my wife now that we're separated. That's all.
I see.
That's all it really was.
I didn't. I have to. I haven't heard all the lead up jokes about your wife that would.
That's true.
Build the premise.
That's true. It's a take my wife please. It's a take my wife please situation, and I opened with at the bottom of the volcano, right?
That's right, exactly. And it was more about the lead singer of Creed and your kind of love for watching him have sex with somebody. That's like it goes into that.
I don't need to be kink shamed on my own show, Hal. What the fuck, man?
I'm not here to yuck your yum. That's not why I'm here.
I'm just kidding. I wonder how someone found that out. Honey, I can't believe you would sleep with my friend. Oh, wait a moment.
Yeah, right. Like the cucking concept. I don't know. I don't get it. Yeah.
Well, I get it because I understand the push and pull of humiliation and all that kind of stuff. I understand sadomasochism. I don't practice it, but I understand it. The psychological game of demean and being used and all that kind of stuff. It's like a weird fantasy dark place that some people don't get, but I understand that.
I don't
but
get
it's yeah, it's more like the bullying verbally that I would find very odd.
Sure.
It's just like, look, you're already having sex with my wife. This is all consensual. Why are you calling me a sissy?
Why can't? Yeah, right. Why can't you just be? I mean, that's just rude.
Yeah, right. Now continue face fucking, you rude man. Like it's just,
that's unnecessary. Yeah, I don't. I grew up in sort of the Casanova '80s rock stuff, which is like, I'll be your backdoor man, sneak around side guy. The Wasp songs like Love Machine and that kind of stuff. Whereas the idea is that you might be with him, but you really want me, as opposed to, this like, we're going to get revenge on someone that never existed except in my fucking head, like some sort of weird Edmund Kemper low res reaction to love you thought you deserved but never got. Like, I don't get that.
Men going their own way. That's their tagline now.
Yes, right. The MGTOW world. Like, I'm a voluntary, involuntary celibate. I'm a Vincel, whatever.
I am also married. Yeah.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. See, now it works.
That would have helped to start with, because I
know. Guys, listen.
The abstract wife in the joke doesn't necessarily fly unless some people know you walk down the aisle. Now I get it.
I can tell you, my audience thought it was hilarious. Actually, they probably are sick of it. They're probably a little bit sick of it.
Did they though?
Well, I've said some really I use the not the hatred of the wife as the bit, but like the callous indifference to anything that has to do with my wife. That's sort of the running theme. And the first joke I ever, 2 years ago, the first joke I ever told, we're separated now. But the first joke I ever told was, because I don't have a driver's license. And so I'm like, your wife has to drive you everywhere? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, and I still haven't been able to teach her how to blow me while she drives. It's really difficult, guys. You'd be surprised.
Sure, okay, get it.
And all the girls that would watch the show love the joke, but all the guys were all like, deeply, how could you say that?
Hey, right.
like total white knighting.
Yeah. Nah, yeah. Some of them, and by the way, some of them, quite frankly, there's a reflex that some guys do that they don't react to those kind of jokes because they're afraid they'll get caught reacting to those kind of jokes, and that will cost them. Yeah, that's all.
Like I like girls that would hear that joke and be like, well, you are that selfish, honey, and then wink, and then cheers, and then everyone's fine. Do you know what I mean? The serious, the serious reactors. I don't like anybody that reacts all crazily to.
Well, my reaction, of course, would have been, look, any woman who can't drive with her left knee isn't marriage material.
There you go. See, that's why you're the comedy stylings writer, and I am not. Right? This is it.
That's what I do. I'm a punch up guy, even if I don't want to.
Do you consider yourself like an activist, or is that a label you avoid and you're just more of a force on certain things? That I loved the work that you've done to I just saw one clip, maybe you've only done it the one time, but I think it was dogs. You were saving dogs or something. And I didn't know that part of you. I had all these clips lined up to watch. I skimmed a couple of them, and that was one of them.
Sure.
And so can you tell me if you have and this isn't a plug, this is literally a freestyle question. I'm just curious if that's one of your passion issues.
Yeah. Well, I've worked with the Humane Society and the ASPCA, and I worked on Prop 2, which was the anti cruelty to farm animals bill. That's meaningful. Like I eat meat. I'm not a vegetarian. However, I would rather the animals that I'm consuming not be tortured before their death. It seems simple to me, and it seems like something you can actually legislate and be okay with. Like, that seems logical. So that if you can make a change, try to make that change. That's and I've done every AIDS walk in the country at least twice. Maybe missed a few minor ones that didn't have the blessing of the greater AIDS walk organization. We just didn't know, but because that was a meaningful fight, getting to the point where it could be a manageable disease and then ultimately a cure. That seems to make sense for everyone involved. I call me crazy. As far as being an activist at that term, I don't know, because I feel like I would reserve that word for the people who serve as volunteers on a board that, like I've done, I've worked with Project Angel Food since the early 90s, for example. And I
Okay.
volunteered and installed the sink in their kitchen when they moved from one place to another. I did the construction on this. Is before Talk Soup, before anybody gave a shit who I was. And I did that because it's the right thing to do. And matter of fact, that's different than marching. I think that's the most activist thing I've ever done, because I relatively an unsung act at the time, especially. And I had to strip the rotten wood from the old sink out from under it because it had soaked through, and it was like, I literally the thing was so rotten, the wood was so rotten under the old sink that I could palm the wood underneath it. I could literally claw plywood with my fingers, and it would just come up like soup. It was grotesque, and it was moldy and nasty, and obviously affected me mentally. But but in doing that, like, to me, that's what activism is. Marching is not activism to me. It's got value, and it definitely is a show of support for an idea or a cause. But activism to me would be, go on Thanksgiving, go hand out some food, go to the mission run by my Masonic brothers in LA, around, at some point, holiday or no, and help them serve food, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's good to lend your profile to stuff, especially stuff that you believe in, that you have a passion for. I think
Sure.
more people should do it.
Attention is great. It's that wouldn't be activism, though. To me, that is a valuable thing. I just don't know what that word for it is. You know what I mean? It's because there's a word for it in the industry, which I find particularly disheartening. It's a phrase, really: cause marketing.
Yeah,
and it means using your charity work or your care about a big known cause to get your name out there and help you. And the existence of it has made me shy away from. Hi, I'm the spokesperson for whatever. Even if it would do some good, unfortunately, I've such a bad taste in my mouth about that idea that it's probably made me do less than I would, which is weird. But it's
a more macro way of saying disaster capitalism, isn't it? That's the Naomi Klein. I think it's like,
sure. Yeah, Naomi Klein's book. Yeah. Sure. Except for the, you're not moving in on the disaster and taking over the space. Fair because enough. It's a space that does not exist, and your product is one that does not counterbalance or intervene in whatever's going on. You're not doing it so you can get the oil out from under someone's feet, because if somebody could watch that same thing and decide fuck you, and they don't like you because you support that cause as much as they could say they're for it. You know what I mean? You gamble with that all the time as a performer. And that's why some people, shy away from the more, difficult or long form ones. So
no, I think it's interesting how the pandemic kind of we're so polarized, and everyone's like, they hear keywords, like hear the phrase free speech. And like half of the population immediately think far right nut job. They immediately think that.
Sure.
And there's so many ironies tied to that. One of them being that free speech is a bastion of liberal ideology born on the fucking campus at Berkeley, right? Like it is as left wing as there is.
Born the Enlightenment. I mean, it predates the fucking country. It's one of the primary founding principles of the country for a reason. It is one of the things you couldn't do anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah.
And that was why it was the first thing they codified, your ability to choose your own religion and to say whatever you want, which, by the way, was, and it's not an accident, was a complete affront to the 10 Commandments, because the first, the special parts of the 10 Commandments is, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain, and thou shalt have no other gods before me. Literally, both of those are nullified by the First Amendment. As a matter of fact, you can have any god or no god before them if you want to, and you can take the Lord's name in vain or not. You have the right to speak your mind. They literally, as deists, specifically counterbalance the 10 Commandments. So, and I always think it's funny when people want to put a 10 Commandments in front of a courthouse, and I'm like, why do you want to just embarrass the 10 Commandments or anybody who believes them? Because you're literally parking it in front of a place that says not only can you kill, but in some cases it's justified. And we will make the decision here on earth whether or not that killing was right or wrong. Not thou shalt not kill, period, end of story. there's a difference between depraved indifference, manslaughter, murder 1, murder 2, self-defense. I don't know.
Yeah, I love how
Yeah.
I love how hardcore Christian political people always talk about the founding fathers this, the founding fathers that. And so far, it's Hal Sparks and Christopher Hitchens are the only ones that actually knew that the founding fathers were deists. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he thought, and I thought that made them better people, and he thought that made them worse.
Yeah,
But
that's
either
right.
way, it was still,
Well,
you
when
know,
you're an anti-theist, there's only a narrow spot for you to go, right? Like there's only
that's
one
true.
little
Yeah.
lane.
And again, well, and that, I guess that's always the debate in atheism circles. Are you atheistic? Are you against the principle of religion as it's wrote and therefore against the concept of God? Are you anti-theist, meaning you're against the organized church principle and anybody saying that they know God before you know God, and there's only one way to get to spiritual knowing but through them? And that's the dangerous part. That's the cult world. That's the, you know, that's where you get a Catholic bishop on Friday the 13th at the murder of all the Templars saying, kill them all, God will know his own, in front of an entire village full of people.
Yeah. I always thought that the anti-theist, there was more of an abstract definition, which is that, like I always thought it was too hard to answer because it depends. Is the God like the God in the Old Testament or a good God? Right? Like it's hard to, I want to be able to decipher between those two. Because if God turns out to be a person who, and Hitch one time was like, heaven sound, you have to worship all the time. I'm paraphrasing. You have to worship all the time in heaven for the rest of your life. It's like a celestial North Korea. So all of his quotes are like, that's kind of what I believe. Worship somebody for the rest of their fucking life? Are you kidding? Like, what is this, the mafia? Like, am I kissing Jesus' ring every night? Like, what's happening here? And
well, you gotta understand their construction of what heaven would be like compared to what life was like in the desert 2,000 plus years ago when these concepts were initially founded, is that if you went to a place where a land of milk and honey, where the ground was soft and always cool, and you could fly and you had no mortal coil to worry about or whatever, you kind of would praise that thing. You'd be grateful every fucking day, which gratitude and praise of God are intrinsically the same fucking thing in that old theistic belief that you wouldn't praise him, but praise meant thanks. You give thanks for. And so, of course, you would be grateful to live in heaven for the rest of your life. What that turned into was, from an evangelical standpoint, because they are the sales arm of Christianity, as so dubbed by themselves, is that you're into the good word, sell the good word. And the good word, you know, is about how you got to let this guy know you're on his team. And if you let him know you're on his team, sing the right hymns, say the right things, promise, take the oath. For God so loved the world that he gave us only begotten son, for whoso believes in him will not perish but live everlasting life. You know, if you John 3:16 it, you could get you'll catch the 3:16 to heaven, right? But
look how good they are at indoctrinating. You sound like, I don't know what denomination you may have grown up in, but if you're like me, you grew up and then now, even as a 46-year-old guy, I haven't been in church in like 3 decades, whatever it's been, I could still do an entire Catholic mass if I wanted to impersonate a priest.
Yeah, but in all fairness, I can also do Kiss's whole first record from the same age range, you know, cover to cover, you know, song for song in order, lyrically. So, you know, that's the nature of the of memory at that point. I wouldn't write too much into.
Kiss had a cult following for all the kids playing at home, though. So it is sort of
Knights in Satan service. The irony, right? But I will say this, that there is a huge difference between memorization and indoctrination. And just because you can do that whole Catholic Mass does not mean that it has an emotional impact on you that will affect your behavior one direction or another. And so the indoctrination, arguably, the indoctrination part of it was a complete failure. They're terrible at it. They can get you to recite words. Some people know, some people don't. I'm a Freemason. And one of the things that they deal with all the time is people like, you can look up on the internet and learn the fucking special handshakes and all that. There's, you know, the secrets of a Freemason, and you can go and there's a video that shows what happens behind them. Like, that's not the secret of Masonry. It's how you're affected by bettering yourself as a man. And no one can take that away from you because it's individual and it has to do with, the path that you're on as a decent human being.
That sounds almost Scientology-ish, right?
Well, no, because Scientology is secondary. There are spirits in you you're trying to drive out.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know,
I retract immediately.
Yeah, and there's no special machine, or is there? But
Apparently it's Tom Cruise too. Jesus.
right, yeah. But in all seriousness, it's the same. You're not indoctrinated by anyone but yourself. You can. I mean, there's one thing to like raise child soldiers to be murderers at some point, but if you really give somebody an opportunity and they're not too scarred just by trauma, they'll turn their life around and live with guilt over what they may have done when they were younger and not want to do it forever, right? It's the
I do
same.
think that introducing kids to religion is indoctrination just by definition. Like I feel like in my household, my kids are 8 and 6.
Sure.
They know daddy's lack of belief or whatever, and I think, because I don't push too hard, have successfully imprinted onto them an evidence-based preference for things in life, right? And but the thing is that
You're
now I have the idea though of when I tell them that the Easter Bunny and Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus isn't real, I'm just going to throw Jesus into the mix, so that he and she will naturally and organically look at Jesus in the same light as the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus when they become adults. I think this is a good new method. I'm thinking of a master class. You don't look like you would buy into the. Are you religious? I don't remember if you actually pointed that out or if you.
No. I lean towards the simulation hypothesis overall, and that that heaven is just, they don't throw you away if you fuck up too bad in the simulation because you're too bad a person to be let out in real society on the other side of whatever wall we live. So that would be the closest thing to kind of materially explaining it. But ultimately, here's the premise that that you buttress up against, I'm sure, is that you operate in and around a country, a society, especially in Canada, built on Christian principles, not Judeo-Christian principles, not Abrahamic traditions. That's the Old Testament shit, but specifically the British interpretation of Christian behavior, and maybe if you're up in Nova Scotia, some remnant Viking mythology thrown in there for good measure, for and mixed with pagan holidays for your agrarian parts of your country. That's what you grew up in. And every generation afterwards did, right? And you built your family structure and probably your rules-based behavior on that, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah, that's
whether
fine.
you think there's
the underpinnings
or after,
but the underpinnings that are there are about the values, not the superstitions, I think, right? Like that was the whole point of the Lincoln Bible, wasn't it? Is that he just removed all the things that aren't scientifically possible and just left it like that?
Well, not because he didn't believe that that Jesus wasn't a mystical being, but because he believed that was red meat for the rabble that was put in, like magic tricks to trick people into. That was the shiny object that made you miss the purpose of the story. The purpose of the story isn't, oh my fucking God, this guy could turn 2 fish into a bunch. The story is that there is something beyond death, and you have to be aware of your worth on this planet, and you should consider, interestingly enough, at the very least, that your enemy might have humanity. For the first time, in that area of the world, that they, amongst the thinkers of that time, that was outlandish. And that was and Jefferson, especially after the reconciliation with after the Revolutionary War, and how they would have to reconcile with England eventually as their primary trade partner, because it was one of the only functioning societies that they interacted with. That the other being the French and the Spanish, which were constantly at war with the English and back and forth all the time. That ultimately would lead to the Brits being the first ones to abolish the slave trade, running slave blockades against the transatlantic slave trade, eventually the Civil War in the United States. And, historically speaking, his belief was, if you're so caught up in walking on fucking water, you're going to miss the point of the part you can't walk on water. I can't walk on water. I can't turn, a fish into multitudes. But what I can do is stop myself short of killing you if I believe I've been wronged, to just consider for a moment that I might be wrong about it, or that there might be some other way for us both forward, right? And that was the important thing to Jefferson. It was the only way, in many ways, he could imagine the world shifting. And this was a guy who grew up his whole life with slaves around, had slaves himself, but in his mind was sleeping with one of them, had children with one of them, and was clearly aware of their humanity, and was like, how the fuck do we get out of this? Because if he turned his slaves free at that point, it's 1776, somebody else would have snatched them up and done maybe worse to them. So I mean, they were in a world we can't even sort of comprehend. So so the values, I think he took that stuff out, not because he thought it was superstition, but because it was distracting specifically from the real worth, the real lesson, the parts we can absorb in any philosophy. Imagine if the teachings of Confucius talked about what a great juggler he was, or the fact that he could maintain an erection for 4 hours without having to go to the doctor. Like you'd go, you know what I mean? You'd be like, what the fuck? That's amazing. You're like, yeah, but in the part where he's saying, treat everyone as if they are attached to you with a golden thread, shouldn't you really focus on that part? I mean, but the dude could fuck for 4 hours.
But dude, there's a talking snake right there. Like
that's right. That's the problem with it. That's the issue that the deists had with it. Was that was the part that was like, it was tribally amazing. It was also based on sort of tribal royalty. It was to convince people that their people were magic, or that their king was magic. Which was one of the ways you kept people loyal to the king. And by the way, if you weren't loyal to the king, the kingdom would splinter and all your people were fucking dead. So it's like the old trichinosis thing. Like, and Chris Rock brought this up. It's like, you can either tell people that pigs are, if you can get trichinosis and you'll fucking die if you eat these pigs, because we have no way, we don't know what causes it. We think it's ethers or spirits, but we know that if you eat that, you're going to fucking die. And other people are like, yeah, but I'm starving. And if I'll gamble with, brain holes if I, in exchange for, being able to feed my family. So they just said, God said, don't do it. And that was enough to keep people from doing it. And it made them look elsewhere so that they would do stuff. And it saved everyone born after. So the billions who are alive today are directly related to somebody going, all right, we tell them it'll make them sick. They'll go, I'm already dying of starvation isn't a sickness. But if we tell them God said no, they just won't. All right. That will save their life? Yeah. We'll figure it out later. You're only alive. You, sir, are only alive because people somebody said the Easter Bunny at one point.
Imagine how easy that job would be. Like to live in Constantine's time and be responsible for what goes in the Bible and why. Oh, it'd be great. You would just getting drunk the whole time and just like
hitting the Zachary Jews at that time, and the different tribes were all fighting over who the fucking Messiah was. One of the reasons why they wrote it out that way, if you ever read Caesar's Messiah, that they conglomerated multiple stories of different guys who were calling themselves the Messiah at the time and formed it into one coherent narrative with one dude. That's why he was in different parts of the country at the same time. And I understand
it followed an astrological date system with a lot of things. It followed like it had similar miracles to like Horus and other anthropomological.
There's also I've seen Zeitgeist too, which is just
I love Zeitgeist because of that word, because it could, those who know, you can just go, and they really just anthropomorphize the stars, and you're like, Zeitgeist.
Yeah, right. Everybody knows that. Yeah. But ultimately, what was Zeitgeist for? What was the purpose of that movie?
It was for apparently at the end, like I thought, if I'm not mistaken, this is going from memory, wasn't it to like, and in order to reach the best place for your mind and soul, here are a bunch of strange looking condos, and we would like you to move there. Project Genesis, whatever it was called.
Yeah, they wanted to audit the Fed and end democracy. It's communist propaganda.
Isn't that libertarian propaganda?
Well, no. That's the bait for the libertarian side.
Okay.
That's the thing. Yeah, I say this on my show a lot, but like every hook has a worm on it or you wouldn't bite. And so everybody's like, well, some of the stuff makes sense. It has to. Anybody who's pulling your fucking chain has to bait you with something that sounds familiar and right with you. They can't just go, everything you know is a fucking lie, and here's why everything's a fucking lie, and you're stupid because you believe it. Like, they'll go, hey, man, we all have the same questions. Like, all right.
Yeah, it's too bad. But, there are some issues that libertarian, let's just say, fairly far to the right and fairly far to the left agree on. There's interesting overlaps. They just get
horseshoe
there
theory,
totally. Absolutely. No, it's not even horseshoe. I don't think it's quite like horseshoe theory. Because I think that it's reasonable. Let's say you're anti-war. I think it's just as reasonable to be like, I don't want to go to other places in the world and start dropping bombs. Okay, I don't want to start doing that shit. As it is to say,
is that what war is?
sometimes, right? But that's a debatable subject, and that is a reasonable position, right?
Sure.
As is for some people. Listen, there's a small country getting the fuck kicked out of them over there, and us as part of the United Nations or NATO or just us or whatever are going to help that country, and hopefully it's not named Iraq.
Right.
It comes from like a different political starting point, but you end up in the same place. It's like that for the drug war as well. The drug war is very similar. For very different reasons, the left and the right agree that the drug war should be over, right?
Yeah, not anymore.
No? Are the Republicans back to being reefer madness people again?
Dude, fentanyl is turning the entire drug war back on its head. The fucking Republicans, Trump was talking about like bombing cartels in Mexico, and they were agreeing with him, like Marge and all that crowd. They were talking about doing that. He is literally saying quick trials and execution for drug dealers, because every drug dealer has 500 dead people on average. I don't know where the fuck he got that, extrapolation statistic from, but whatever. He's regularly saying that the drug war has not only ended from a right-wing standpoint, they want it to be an actual war, not a metaphor.
Yeah. And that'll make the bureaucracy a lot more wealthy as well, right?
No, it'll just make a bunch of people dead.
Right, but weapons profiting is a thing in every skirmish now, and it seems to be okay. It used to be war profiteering, and now it's like, oh, that's fine. Well, people need their weapons. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I always find that hard to swallow.
Yeah, I mean, I like from my point of view, like when he says that shit, it's just gibberish red meat that will never see the light of day. But it heralds a shift point on the far right, anyways, about that, because they used to be kind of laissez-faire. I mean, the idea was libertarians were Republicans that smoke pot, right? That's Bill Maher. That was the idea, that he's right. That's who they are. And then it eventually it was just they found a common enemy in the government. So it isn't that right wingers are against the drug war anymore. It's just they think the DEA is right up there with the EPA, and it's just you kneecap the federal government everywhere you can. Period. And that was part of it. That's where the Ron Paul shit comes in. Libertarianism is. I mean, that's more akin to Scientology, because as far as a political concept, because it's basically like latte anarchist, ultimately, or like sovereign citizens with a cottage. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, it's just silly at a certain point. Like, what does it look like? It's as silly as a narco-communist or whatever. Like, what we're gonna do is we'll all agree to meet here on Wednesday. Oh, will we? How long will that shit last? And you know what the funny thing is like most like laissez-faire, libertarianism, anarchy, any of those kind of thought forms, even to some degree, tribal communism. You don't think we didn't have that shit before? I mean, that's how most of society that was not directly within striking distance of a monarch acted for centuries, and it was fucking horrible. Most of those people died of smallpox.
I know people that have parents that were raised in communist countries that do nothing but roll their eyes at people that either embrace communism or call countries like Canada a communist state. Like both of those positions are equally absurd.
Yeah, they're silly.
It's so funny. Unfortunately we have to wrap this up because there's a show coming on after mine that's using the stream. But I would love to have you back, dude. I didn't even really. I knew about the activism or the lending your profile for good causes thing, but I didn't know that you were kind of like this astute into politics until like late today when I was watching the podcast that you literally just wrapped before you started doing this one.
Right. Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide. Yes, it's a live stream. I wouldn't call it a podcast because I live stream and there's sort of a different arc to it because it's usually the sound of my own voice. But yes. And that's, that turned into something after we were, and I know we got to get out of here, but when the lockdown happened, I was like, touring went away as a stand-up, production shut down acting wise. And I was like, I got a kid and I gotta, feed him. And I got a roof to keep over our head. I got to do something. So I just went dive in, try to find a way to be useful and to some degree, earn us a living until this ship rights itself. And it turned into a real thing. It actually has been it's been a joy. It's now its own element of my career. It's totally unexpected, but it's great.
Well, I think it's amazing. And I think you do it well. And please come back. That was a good conversation.
I'm glad to.
All right, buddy. We'll see you soon then.
Thanks, Hal. Chapter 1. All right.
That's right. Wife jokes. Think about it.
Oh yeah.
Okay. See you later, man.
You're-
That was Hal Sparks. I think I cut him off saying something at the end, but you have to know when to pull the trigger, and I did it wrong. And tomorrow we have Rob Davis, and then Casual Friday on Friday. Might have a surprise guest. Oh, Decisive. Decisive on Friday. It's a Blackballed doubleheader. Legendary rapper. If you don't know who he is, check him out. He's dope. And he will be on the show on Friday, just before Casual Friday, and we'll see you then. I'm very tired. I'm Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed.